Get people's attention. Today is a special meeting agenda, the County Board of Canvassers with elections. Today's date is May 28th, and the time is 1:31 p.m. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda? None? Okay. First business item, canvass of May 21, 2024 primary election pursuant to Idaho Code 34-1205 and 34-1206.
And I believe Leslie's on the phone and has joined us.
Oh, and yes, and in attendance is Commissioner Duncan on the phone and Commissioner Matari. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Asa Gray, Elections Manager for the record. We're here today to present you with the canvass of the May 21st, 2024 primary election. I apologize for I emailed these documents out as well about 30 minutes ago. I apologize for the lateness of that. We were working right up till this morning to get the new version of the canvass report, which is our new form of the abstract that the state presented us with. So once we got that and we made sure that it was accurate and proofed and everything, we got this all sent out. So I am going to start with the canvass narrative. We have several things we would like to bring to your attention from this election, and then I'll mention a couple things within the abstract canvass of votes. So we, as always, we tested our three DS850 digital scan ballot tabulators and a DS300 precinct counter on May 3rd, prior to any voting taking place in person for early or election day voting. Witnessing the test were Clerk Locke to my right, and then Chief Deputy Clerk Grace Blomgren, Commissioner Matari, and members of the public. The DS850 machines were again tested in the morning on Election Day, May 21st, before any ballots were counted, and tested a final time in the evening on May 21st, after all voted ballots were counted. And each machine report, including that of the public test, showed 100% agreement with our test deck that we mark in-house in every test. Unofficial election results were posted online to the Idaho State Results site late on May 21st, and they were also posted to the Kootenai County website late on May 21st. The unofficial precinct-by-precinct election results were posted online to the Kootenai County website the next day on May 22nd, 2024. During the canvass period, while exporting results for the canvass process, I discovered an error that I made while on the adjudication board on election night. Just to explain a little about the process, adjudication is the process by which ballots with unclear markings, overvotes, or fully blank ballots are reviewed within our election results reporting system by a board of 3 people in order to determine the voter intent of the markings on the ballot. Only the contests on the ballot that are flagged by the tabulator as needing review for those aforementioned reasons are adjudicated by the board, while the remainder of the ballot is counted and already included in our preliminary unofficial results. The adjudication board works throughout election night to adjudicate the necessary contests after each upload of results from the tabulators. After each set of those reviews or adjudications, the results have to be what is called committed in the system in order for those adjudications to be reflected in the voting results reports. I determined that I failed to commit the results of those final 38 adjudicated ballots on election night, so those contests, specifically just the contests needing adjudication on those ballots, were not reflected in the unofficial election results that were posted on election night. It is important to note that the count of the ballots themselves was already reflected in the unofficial results, as were all votes on those ballots in the other contests which did not need adjudication. When I found the error, I notified Clerk Locke, and we notified the Secretary of State's office of this error. And in consultation with the Secretary of State, the unofficial results were updated online on Friday, May 24th to reflect the totals, including these adjudications. And this update was done both on the Idaho State Results site and the Kootenai County website. Again, that occurred on Friday, May 24th. The proper inclusion of the adjudications did not alter the outcome of any contest, and I want to make clear that none of the adjudications affected any contest for precinct committeemen. The majority of the adjudications were actually blank ballots or overvoted ballots, so those remained as such, and so the changes in vote totals were ultimately minimal. And just to briefly go over there, in your packet and in what I sent out should be just a short little sheet here that shows exactly what those changes to the unofficial results were, and I would just like to read those into the record really quickly. For State Senator District 5 for the Democratic Party, Adam Chapman received 2 more votes after those adjudicated ballots were included. For State Representative District 5 Seat A for the Democratic Party, Christy Reed Johnson received 1 additional vote. For County Commissioner District 1 for the Republican Party, Mark Eberline received 3 additional votes. For County Commissioner District 1 for the Republican Party, Dale Giboney received 1 additional vote. For County Commissioner District 1 for the Republican Party, Bat Masterson received 1 fewer vote. For County Sheriff for the Republican Party, John Michael Mike Bauer received 1 additional vote. For the judicial contest to succeed Justice G. Richard Bevan, the only candidate, G. Richard Bevan, received 1 additional vote. For the judicial contest to succeed Judge David W. Grattan, David W. Grattan received 1 additional vote. And for the judicial contest to succeed Judge Jessica Marie Lorello, Jessica Marie Lorello received 1 additional vote. So after all the adjudications were included in the unofficial results, those were the only changes to the results. And I do like to point out, this is why we have a canvass process and a canvass period, is to allow us to make sure that we can account for anything that happened during the election, whether it be at the polling place or at our office, that might have been in error, or so we can also bring to you the full picture of what occurred at the polls, as you will see more of here in the canvass document. But that is why we have a canvass period, and that is why the results are unofficial until canvassed by you all, the Board of Commissioners acting as the Board of Canvassers, because that way we can address anything that may arise during that review. Clerk Locke did send this in a press release on May 24th. I don't know that it's actually been chosen to be published by anyone, but we did send a press release out so that the public would be notified. And of course, anyone watching or attending this meeting today can know that as well. Are there any questions on that before I continue on?
Commissioner Duncan?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
So including early voting and absentee totals, 32,703 votes were cast in the election for a voter turnout average of 30.4%. Percentages varied by precinct from a low of 17.7% in precinct 506 to a high of 46.4% in precinct 304. And I would like to point out precinct 304 did have a Hauser Fire base budget question on their ballot, so I ultimately think that that contributed to some of that turnout as well. So as always, our staff performs audits of the counts to make sure everything lines up as we're processing these ballots. Early voted ballots and mailed out absentee ballots that were tallied by the counting machines totaled 2,484 and 7,110 respectively, which matches the expected count. Absentee ballots are run through the tabulator by precinct and then by batch in order to be able to track the exact count of ballots received. Ballots cast by ballot style were matched against machine tallies and the e-poll books. There were small discrepancies on election day in precincts, as I will address below in the document. During early voting, staff, temps, and poll workers used ballot on demand to print voters' ballots and used a DS300 precinct counter to receive and count the ballots. We had 2,484 ballots cast, with additional ballots spoiled by voters and reissued. Staff members performed at a high level on the DS850 tabulation machines on election day and night, processing ballots efficiently and properly. The DS300 precinct counter ran smoothly at early voting. One precinct 207A Republican ballot from precinct 207 election day voting did not get counted by the tabulator on election night. We determined this during canvass, and this is likely due to human error when the ballots were being run through the tabulator. As mentioned before, an error was made with the inclusion of results from the final ballot adjudication on election night, and procedures are being put into place to prevent this error from occurring in the future. We had 376 poll workers working this election, and we would like to publicly thank them for their hard work. Without them, we could not conduct elections in Kootenai County, and I know that Clerk Locke shares that sentiment, that our poll workers really are the backbone of what allows us to even put on an election and run it as smoothly as it does. Of 23,109 Election Day ballots cast, 99.99% had zero ballot issuance errors. 59 of the 73 voting precincts had zero ballot issuing errors. Precincts 304, 521, and 522 had 10 ballot styles for this election. All other precincts had 5 ballot styles for this election. The following precincts made balloting errors on Election Day. Precinct 203 called the office to inform us that they did not provide a voter with their appropriate ballot choices when checking in the voter and had to reissue them a 203A Republican ballot instead of the 203A nonpartisan ballot, or as it is designated in our system, unaffiliated, due to this error. Precinct 203 also allowed a registered Republican voter who had requested and received a 203A Democratic absentee ballot to receive a 203A Republican ballot when surrendering their absentee at the polling place. And I'd like to point out here, while our e-poll books lock down a voter's ballot options based on their registered party, they do not currently lock down when someone has been sent an absentee ballot for a specific party that they chose that ballot for. It just provides them with all their possible options based on their party affiliation. That is something we're working with the state and our vendor to fix before the next primary election. However, we did train our poll workers, because it does have a little flag in there showing in the e-poll book to the poll workers what ballot was sent to that voter. We trained our poll workers to make sure that they are only giving that ballot again to the voter per Idaho code, which states that if you're sent a certain type of absentee, you can only receive that same ballot should you spoil it on Election Day. And by and large, our poll workers did a very good job of giving out the correct ballot to at all the precincts across the board and at early voting. Precinct 304 allowed a registered voter who had requested and received a 304B nonpartisan absentee ballot to receive a 304B Republican ballot when surrendering their absentee at the polling place. Precinct 312 called the office to inform us that they did not provide a voter with their ballot choices when checking in the voter and had to reissue them a 312A Republican ballot instead of a 312A nonpartisan ballot due to this error. Precinct 314 gave 3 voters 314A Republican ballots who were checked in and should have received 314A Democratic ballots. Precinct 314 also had one more 314A Republican ballot cast than voters checked into the e-poll book. Likely 2 ballots stuck together and were given out to a voter, and it is worth noting that there were 2 blank A Republican ballots that were cast on Election Day in that precinct. Precinct 315 had one more 315A Republican ballot cast than voters checked into the e-poll book. Again, it's likely 2 ballots stuck together and were given out to a voter. There was 1 blank A Republican ballot cast on Election Day in that precinct. Precinct 320 gave 1 voter a 320A Republican ballot who should have received a 320A nonpartisan ballot. Precinct 403 allowed a registered voter who had requested and received a 403A nonpartisan absentee ballot to receive a 403A Republican ballot when surrendering their absentee at the polling place. Precinct 409 gave 1 voter a 409A Republican ballot who should have received a 409A nonpartisan ballot. Precinct 420 had 2 more 420A Republican ballots cast than voters checked into the e-poll book. Likely 2 ballots stuck together and were given out to voters, and there were 2 blank A Republican ballots that were cast on Election Day in that precinct. Precinct 509 had 1 more 509A Republican ballot cast than voters checked into the e-poll book. Again, it's likely 2 ballots stuck together and were given out to a voter, and there was a blank 509A Republican ballot in that precinct on Election Day. Precinct 512 allowed a registered voter who had requested and received a 512A nonpartisan ballot to receive a 512A Republican ballot when surrendering their absentee at the polling place. Precinct 515 had 1 more 515A Libertarian ballot cast than voters checked into the e-poll book, 1 more 515A Republican ballot cast than voters checked into the e-poll book, and 1 fewer 515A nonpartisan ballot cast than voters checked into the e-poll book. The combination of these 3 means 1 nonpartisan requesting voter likely was given the wrong ballot, and 1 extra ballot was likely given out. Precinct 519 gave 1 voter a 519A Democratic ballot who should have received a 519A nonpartisan ballot, and Precinct 522 gave 1 voter a 522A nonpartisan ballot who should have received a 522C Constitution ballot. And the difference between the A and C ballots was the presence of a ballot question for the school levy in that area. Precincts 302 and 516 each had one fewer ballots cast than voters checked into the e-poll book. The best deduction we can make based on the count of ballots that were run through the tabulator, the unused ballots, and the poll book check-ins of voters is that in each case, the voter left with their ballot after checking in without choosing to vote their ballot into the ballot box. Various balloting errors occurred at polling places that were caught by judges, poll workers, or voters and corrected at that time and are not included in the errors percentage. None of these errors affected the outcome of any contests on the ballot. And we like to always make sure we're providing you with a transparent view of what occurred at the election. That's why we list all of these. I will say again, I don't have the exact number, but if you add these up, I believe it's about 20 ballots that had issuing errors that were not corrected at the polling places out of 23,109 election day ballots that were given out. So it is a very, very, again, small percentage of errors here. And again, none of these errors affected the outcomes of any contests on the ballot. And then just a brief conversation about voter registration here. Of 1,120 early voting and election day registrations, there were 110 registration cards missing required information. Some registration cards contain multiple missing items, and the items missing are described as follows. There were 15 cards missing the residence time in Idaho, 7 missing the gender, 43 missing the answer to the question of, are you at least 18 years old on election day, 21 missing the answer to the legal disqualifications question, 34 missing date of birth, 8 missing registration cards in general, 8 missing the driver's license or last four of their social, 29 missing the answer to are you a U.S. citizen question, 3 missing signatures, 3 missing a complete name, and 4 address issues. Various registration forms also had the party affiliation marked as unaffiliated, which will not actually be how the voter is ultimately registered due to the voter then picking a ballot that affiliated them with a political party. Voters also marked party affiliations on registration forms to which they were not able to be changed due to the e-poll book preventing the ability for voters who are already affiliated to change party affiliation on election day pursuant to state law. Business addresses, which are programmed into our state voter system to prevent voter registration at that address, are supposed to carry over into the e-poll books to block registration at those addresses. However, it was discovered during early voting that rather than blocking those addresses for registration, the e-poll books allowed registration at these addresses. This was discovered due to one voter being allowed to register and vote in Precinct 511 using a mailing store address instead of Precinct 501 where the voter should have registered. This issue will be addressed with our state voter system and e-poll book vendor 10X going forward. The voter was contacted and returned the next week to fill out a new registration form with the appropriate address so they will be registered correctly for future elections. We also included a list of these business addresses in the polling place supply boxes and at early voting to prevent this from occurring again at this election. Correspondence is sent by our office after each election to voters in order to complete major missing information on the registration cards. It is worth noting that each of these voters still had to provide acceptable photo ID and acceptable proof of residency pursuant to Idaho code. And in many cases, the information missing from the actual registration form was programmed into the e-poll book system, but was not completed on the form. Completed forms are required by state law, so we must still correspond with the voters to try to achieve that. Precinct 202 checked in a voter who proceeded to vote a 202A Libertarian ballot, and then it was determined the voter had moved and actually should have re-registered and voted in Precinct 201. Precinct 303 re-registered and voted 3 voters that belonged in Precinct 302, and Precinct 505 re-registered and voted 1 voter that belonged in Precinct 502. Again, none of these errors affected the outcome of any contests on the ballot, and we consistently train our poll workers on the completion of the registration forms and also on making sure that a voter is in the proper precinct, and if they have a question on an address, how to look that up or that they can contact our office before proceeding. We had one more unusual factor at this election, which was at Precinct 306 at Betty Kiefer Elementary. The precinct was placed on an emergency hold, actually the school entirely was, for about 20 minutes due to the presence of a suspicious person outside the building. Voters were allowed to enter the polling area through a back entrance to vote during this short hold. With that, I'd like to draw your attention to one more form that I apologize, I believe I did not email out, but I will read these numbers into the record. These are the absentees that were returned invalid and the reason for that. We had 101 absentees received late, which means they were received after the polls closed and we cannot accept them by state law. We had 34 absentees rejected for the signature not matching the signature on file for the voter registration. We had 5 absentees that signed each other's ballots, and with that being an odd number, it is always possible that one spouse was able to come in and cure that ballot, or additionally, that the second spouse never even turned in their ballot, but we could tell from the signature that it was someone else in the household. We had 4 absentees rejected for no signature at all. And then we had 1 military Uokava overseas ballot received after the polls closed late, so we could not accept it. That is our narrative report for the canvas. With that, if there are any questions or anything that you would like me to go over in the abstract of votes report, I would be happy to do so. I will mention that we did have 1 precinct committee candidate who did not meet the required 5 votes threshold required by state law to be elected as a precinct committeeman, and that was one of the Libertarian precinct committee candidates, Chris Ward in precinct 404, only received 2 votes and did not meet the threshold to qualify as a precinct committee candidate.
Questions? Commissioner Duncan, do you have any questions?
I do not. I appreciate it, and I was actually able to read all the information before this meeting, so thank you for getting that out to me.
Yes, thank you. And it's quite a logistical challenge when you run these elections. There's a lot of people, a lot of moving pieces, and I think given the few number of issues that you had compared to the total amount of votes that were cast is remarkable. So keep it up. And of course, when you find little process issues that get past you, it's a good time to reflect and then figure out how to make sure it doesn't happen again in the future. And that's all you can ever ask. So thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to say the primary every 2 years is probably the most complicated election. In 22, they had 5 ballot styles for the 4 party types and then a nonpartisan ballot. Same thing this year. And so training on that's complicated because we have some parties that are closed, 3 parties, Libertarian, Constitution, Republican, Democratic primaries open, and then the nonpartisan voter is eligible, or the unaffiliated voter is eligible to select what party ballot they'd like to either join with the Republican, Constitution, or Libertarian Party, or choose a Democratic Party and still remain unaffiliated. So we do go through training with our poll workers. Typically it's about 2.5 hours. We're covering this all in training, but it's a lot of information every 2 years to cover. So we appreciate, again, the poll workers for the complication of this election and the good work that they did do.
Thank you. Anything else?
We just need a motion to accept the results of the canvass.
And I'm ready for that. I move that we accept and approve the canvass of the May 21st, 2024 primary election pursuant to Idaho Code 34-1205 and 34-1206.
I second the motion.
Chair Pro Tem Matari,
Aye.
Chair Duncan.
Aye.
And the motion is approved. So thank you very much. Next up is public comment. Does anyone, would they like to speak? Anyone on the phone? Jonathan? No? Okay. Well, 1:54, meeting adjourned. Thank you.